live? Okay, welcome back to the W. Cushing Die Kitchen. We are redoing the original podcast from 2 weeks ago because for some reason it didn't work, but now we've got it going. So welcome everybody. I want to thank Rug Hooking Magazine for allowing me to repod and for allowing me this opportunity. What we're going to go over today is we take our scraps at the end of the year and we keep them in a big bin, and then we over dye them with the salt that we use, and the kosher salt that we use to clean our spoons. So I'm going to go over some dye basics. I'm going to answer some questions that came in from last time, and I had a question throughout the last 2 weeks about how to over dye with our black walnut. So as a bonus, I am going to age some fabrics with our black walnut dye. So, and Deb Lynch is behind the camera today, and she'll read your questions as she can when they pop up. If she can't, that's okay. I will answer them later. Okay? All right. First thing is, when you're going to, you have to open your fiber. You have to soak it. You saw the video I put out this morning. You use warm water. You put all your pieces in. Enjoy. Okay? People ask, palm olive. This does not have a degreaser in it. A degreaser is an oil. An oil will screw up your pH. It will screw up the dyes. It may not let the dye grab that tight. So Lemon Joy. And you can buy Lemon Joy in many different places, your local food store, Walmart. But for those of you that use WB Mason, you can buy it by the case. Works like a charm. Dye spoons. We have our metal dye spoons. You should keep them in a jar of kosher salt. This was the jar from 2 weeks ago. Yes, this is 2 weeks worth of cleaning. And this is mine from last year, and you can see how dirty it is. But what you do with the kosher salt, and we use this coarse kosher salt, when you put it in the jar and you get done measuring, you want to be able to clean your dye spoons. So you go like that, and it should take the dye off. Well, mine's dirty, so I'm really not getting it all clean. And what I do is I'll go in here and I'll clean it in here. It's a lot cleaner. At the end of the week, which I haven't done yet this week because it's Thursday, not the end of the week, is I wash out all the spoons with warm water, no soap, just warm water. I lay them on a paper towel and I let them air dry for at least 1 day. You don't want your dye spoons to be wet when you use them because the dye will stick into that. So what we're going to do, and what I've set up is I have 1 pot of scrap over here, and in the scrap it is boiling. It's not a rolling boil, but we do have it in a boil. And this is some of the textures we're going to use the black walnut with, and then there's a surprise for the one in the back. Okay? I use Enamel Pots. This one is a great one. It'll hold a couple of yards of wool. You do have to let it get warm. It does take a little bit longer. This has been on the stove, not with the wool in it, but it's been on the stove for 45 minutes to get it to the right temperature. So the first way that we're going to dye, okay, and also we have our electric kettle over here, and from those from last time, remember, electric kettle works. Electric kettle, when it's done and it clicks off, is 140 degrees. And at 140 degrees is what you need to mix your dye. Now normally you would take a dye from one of our Cushing packages or any acid dye and mix up a formula. But today what we're going to do is we're going to take our dirty kosher salt. I'm going to use my 1/4 teaspoon, okay? And I'm going to measure into a 4-cup, and by the way, no plastic dye spoons and no plastic measuring cups. They don't work. So I'm going to measure 4 in here. That is a teaspoon of the kosher salt to start. I'm not doing them level, I'm doing them heaping. You can't repeat this dye, okay? This is not a dye that you can repeat, so we don't have to be too precise. And those that know me also know I hate to write anything down. So our water is going, it's in here. We're going to create a dye bath. Again, use glass. Try to buy them new if you can. because if they're used and you buy your measuring cups used, you don't know if oil was used, okay? So I have that in there. My kettle has clicked off, and I am going to pour in 4 cups of boiling water. And now the dye, because it's not as concentrated as normal dye, it's very light. Okay? And since it's very light, you take a spoon and you look at it, and it's very, very light. So we need to add a little bit more into it. So I'm going to just go in again, and I think I just may dump a little bit in here. This is such a precise measure, as you can tell. Notice I didn't take my dye spoon and go like this and put it back in here. That's what you don't do. So this is now a little bit darker. It actually has a rosy look to it. And that's okay for our first dye bath. I may add a little bit more to it, because look, we have a whole other jar. Oh look, somebody's placing an order. Yes. Now we have a little bit darker. So what I'm going to do, and use a metal spoon. It's non-conductive. Use a metal spoon to stir. Don't use a plastic spoon. You can also use a wooden spoon. But then don't stir your pasta with a wooden spoon. Okay, so now I'm going to just pour it into here. And I have all different size pieces, all different colors, and I'm going to pour it in. Then I'm going to take my spoon, my metal spoon, and I'm going to just slightly move it around. I have what is called a crowded pot. I like modeling. Most of us like it when it's modeled, so we like a crowded pot. However, it's already dissipated with the salt. It's already clear. So I think we need to add just a little bit more in here, which we will do. And what I'm going to do, I didn't use all of my boiling water, so I'm going to come back and use that. And by the way, the Hamilton Beach electric kettle is probably one of the best. If you have a Walmart by you, you can use that, or you can get it off of Amazon and have it delivered in 2 days. The Hamilton Beach we use, and of course we dye every day. We put it through its paces, and it lasts us about 1.5 years to 2 years per kettle. And they lasted about 6 months. So somebody had asked what type of electric kettle. We use a Hamilton Beach. So now I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to inadvertently, I'm going to pour some more. Just like that, okay? And let that go. Now, normally for a normal pot dye, you would let it go 15 to 20 minutes, don't worry. And you move it around a little bit. The more you stir the pot, the more even the dye. So if you're a pot stirrer, and you know who you are, but if you're a pot stirrer, you don't want to do that. You just want to move it around so it models it. Now, somebody did ask last time, and since we were redoing the podcast, I thought it was better to show. She asked why I made a dye bath and poured it in. Could we just pour it into the water and stir it around? When you do that, you will get little pixelations of color. You may get a red blob, you may get a green blob, you may get a blue blob. So you really don't want to do that per se, unless you don't mind that. It's what we call pixelation, okay? So we're going to let that pot sit for just a little bit, but if we wanted to, and I'll show you what you can do, because I really would prefer you not just pour it right into the pot. You can take the water that's in here, because it's already hot, and look at how much color's already gone out of it. And you can add more salt to this here, okay? Again, we're not going to repeat this dye. We couldn't repeat it if we tried. So, but if you notice, every time I'm stirring this, I'm making sure that the dye bath is dissolved, okay? That you can do because it's not a repeat. I don't recommend it normally.
What kind of dye was this? I missed the very beginning.
Oh, sure. This is dyeing with our kosher salt. We use Cushing dye naturally, and we use it to clean out our spoons. So what we're using is all the dye that is in with our kosher salt. So that's what we're doing right now. So at the end of the year, we empty these out, or if they get too dirty quickly, because this is another jar of it, and we dye a big mottled pot of it to make a background. Okay, so it is different colors of Cushing dye, and it's probably all of our 97 colors in here. So that's what that is. And we have a little bit more in the jar, so what do we say? Should we add it in to see what we get? Sure, let's add it in and see what we get. So I'm going to add that in. I've added that in, and this is another jar because we go through about 4 to 5 jars in a year. And when your salt gets to be completely this color or this color, that's when you know you have to change it. And I'm going to do it one more time. If you notice, I'm not stirring now, I'm just pouring. I'm just pouring all the way around the pot. That's it. So there we are. And we'll let that go for about 15 or 20 minutes. Now, in the second pot, what I have is very interesting. I have 3 textures. And I have a 1/4 yard of each texture. And so I have Buffalo Girl, Skinny Mini, and Checkered Past. I've soaked them, okay? And so now I want to age these. I don't want these as sharp. I want to make a nice primitive background. How am I going to do that? Well, and so we used to use black walnut to age, where you would have to grind up the walnut shells, mix it, do this, do that, all the other stuff. So instead, what we're going to do is I created a black walnut die. And the black walnut die is a limited edition, and it comes in a die pack, just like everything else. And for 3/4 of a yard, I am going to measure into a dry measure, and I'm going to have to put the water back on in a second. We're going to make a trip over to the sink in a minute. But I'm going to measure out of my packages, okay? I am going to measure out a 1/2 teaspoon of black walnut dye, because Buffalo Girl is a little darker, it's a little more camel, so I'm measuring out a 1/2. We can always darken it. You can't make it lighter once it's dark. Okay? I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to clean it up. Lay that down. When you're mixing a dye formula, I did want to go over this. This was another question. Lay your dye packet like this in front of what you just put down. This lets you know what's in this mixing jar, so you don't get confused. And so if there is an order to your dye process, and there's 3 or 4 different colors and they have to go in a certain order, you know what is in each mixing cup. Okay? So right now I'm going to take the kettle and I'm going to come on over to the kitchen sink while Deb lets you look in the pots. And yes, we have a very small kitchen, but when you're carrying 35 pounds of dyed wool across the kitchen, you don't need it to be big. Now you can see in the one pot where we put in the salt, there's a little bit of pixelation. I could see a little red dot. And it's nothing to worry about, because when you go to hook it, it really won't matter, hopefully, and it won't show up. So we're going to put the kettle on, okay? And I'm going to show you where the pixelation is. There's a little bit right here on the top. You can see a little bit of red. So you can mix it a little bit, see if that will mix it to go around. If not, that's okay. But let's look at our water. Our water is almost clear already. Now, you need a mordant to set this dye. Yes, I know it is with kosher salt, but you still need a mordant to set it. So for this case, I'm going to use citric acid. And you can buy it in the 1/2 pound or the pound bag. And I'm just going to sprinkle it in to the water. And I'm going to do about a 1/2 teaspoon for this pot and let it go. This has a faster or higher pH than our white vinegar. which I'm going to use the white vinegar when we do the black walnut. What's the difference? Somebody asked last time. There's all sorts of different vinegars. I use a household white vinegar. This has each, the citric and the vinegar has a pH. I could bore you to death about the pH. The pH does control the color, just like what's in your water controls the color. So this is a standard pH. This is a standard pH. If you go to industrial strength vinegar, you would use less of it, but it has a higher pH. And it can change your colors, especially blue, black, purple, and gray.
So is this being recorded?
Yes.
I see you're not wearing gloves or a mask. Do you worry about inhaling the airborne particles?
No, I usually wear gloves, but for this I don't. An industrial vent. If I was dyeing yards of this and not pot dyeing, I would have the vent on, but you couldn't hear me. I'd be talking over the vent. So this is an industrial vent that will take this right out. The vent is always on. And yes, sometimes I do wear a mask. I don't wear a mask unless I'm dyeing 2 to 3 yards in a pot and I'm doing a different type of dye. Hope that answers it.
Will plain black work the same?
As black walnut? No. Plain black does not work the same as black walnut. Black walnut has a tawny brown to a rosy color to it, just like a real black walnut. Black will age your wool. If you want to age red, if you want to age orange, if you want to age any of those neon colors, you can use 1/128th of a teaspoon of black into 2 cups boiling water, and you can age about a half a yard of that material. It will age it, but not the same way that black walnut does. Black walnut ages it just as if you had used a black walnut shell from outside on the ground.
Is it possible to use too much citric acid?
Yes, it is.
Will it hurt the wool?
Yes, it will hurt the wool. You can have the temperature too high. You can put in way too much citric. If I put in 2 tablespoons of citric, sometimes you get the wool after you dye it, it's a little crisp, potato chip crisp. When it's stiff like that, you've used too much. It's not as strong or as supple as it should be. Good question on the citric. Any other questions? Okay, good. So we have our ½ teaspoon of black walnut. Now, if I want this black walnut to stay where I put it in the pot and not mottle, I would add citric immediately to my dye bath. If you put citric in your dye bath, where you put the dye pretty much stays put. Okay, not always, because there's water that does move, but if you want a more mottled look, you don't put it in the dye bath. You would put it in after or use vinegar. Vinegar is a slower uptake than citric. I like to use vinegar if I'm going to do a slow mottled uptake. For example, I like to use vinegar when I'm dyeing purples, when I'm dyeing blues. When I'm dyeing high chroma values of our dyes, our golds, our yellows, our golden browns, then I'll use citric. Okay?
Another question.
Yes.
Didn't we use khaki drab to dull?
Yes, you could use khaki drab to dull, but that does green. This ages drab. But we've also always used black walnut shells, but this is just a lot less messy. But the khaki drab does have a green component. Okay, our kettle has clicked off. We're going to put in 4 cups of water. Also, another thing, if you have bluettes, which is the industrial strength blue, not just plastic gloves, you can put your hands into the dye bath and not feel the heat, okay, as long as they're good industrial bluettes. So now I'm going to mix it. Please make sure you mix it. Just make sure, because you never know how it's gonna, if it's gonna not mix very well. If you're using older dyes, make sure. And we have a nice black walnut. And what I'm gonna do with my 4 cup, And it's a nice, it's not a dark brown, it's not a black, it's somewhere, it looks just like black walnut, somewhere in between. And I'm going to pour it right over the textures. Okay? And then I'm going to take my spoon and I'm just going to move it around. I'm not going to add, I did not add citric to the dye bath yet. I did not add vinegar. I want this to be a slow modeled take up in here, so I'm going to add vinegar. And I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of white vinegar, or thereabout.
So someone commented, I like to use half khaki drab and half medium brown to age in equal amounts.
Yep, that will age it. That will age it with a greeny taunt. This will age it with a rosy taunt. So whichever one you would like, that would work as well. Also, if you wanted a darker aging to that mixture, you could use khaki drab and mummy brown. I do like that. If you wanted a golder age to it, a brighter age, more yellowy, then you would use khaki drab and golden brown. So yes, they are all different options in equal measure. Absolutely correct, in equal measure. So the vinegar has gone in, I've stirred it again. So we still have our pots on. And I'm going to go to the last pot. The last pot has boiling water in it, no wool, and I'm going to make a dye bath in the pot, and then I'm going to put the wool in. Now the wool is already wet, the wool is already pre-soaked. Don't put your dry wool in unless you want it to really be spattered looking, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our black walnut.
So how much acid do you use per amount of wool?
Okay, I use for a 1/4 teaspoon of citric. Not per wool, but per how much dye was put in. So I'm going to go into the last pot over here in the back. Yes, I know it's in the back, but we did try to light this up a little bit. And I'm going to carefully, measure. Okay. Approximately half a teaspoon of black walnut, because I want it a little darker. And now, I am going to take what's in this magic pot, which is a khaki, kind of solid. It's got a little bit of different modeling to it. And I'm going to just put this in. It's wet, as you can tell, and I'm going to dump it in. Okay? And then I'm going to take my magic spoon, which if I ever lost my magic spoon, God knows what would happen, because this was Joan Moshimer's magic spoon. So we've got to keep the spoon. And I'm going to move it around. Do you notice I'm getting a little bit darker color? I don't have as much water in the pot. And these we'll post later on so you can see exactly what they look like. We're really hoping that the live video will post this time. I think that it will. And you can see the color being taken up. Now I would like that one to take up slowly. So on top I'm going to pour a little bit of vinegar.
So why do you want it to be taken up slowly?
Because I don't want any harsh colors. I want it modeled for, I like a modeled look to my wool when I use it personally. I just want it to take up slowly, and I want it to model itself around. I don't want a lot of highs and lows, lights and darks in there. Okay, there we go. So that was where we made the pot the dye bath and put the wool into it. But the wool is still wet, so that is very, very important. Okay? Now it's time for show and tell. This is our white wool. This is W. Cushing's white wool. It's a little creamy, but it is pretty much for the industry white wool. This is what we dye a lot of our formulas over. Those of you that get Mother of Pearl, Frosty, Gull, this is our white wool. And this is the white wool that we sell and we use. Now last time, for the video that didn't take, which is a good thing I guess, we get to talk again. this is what came out of the salt from the first time. And these are just all different pieces, but when you put them together, they make a nice background. There's a darker piece because that was an oatmeal wool. And now this piece on the bottom has a lot of what we call mottling. And this is what I like. I like a lot of mottling. So when I hook it, it gives a nice overall effect. That was one batch that came out last time. And then from the same salt in a different, here is the lighter pot. And see, we had some glitter, and there's the glitter left over. And there's this one with a little bit of darker in it. And then there's that. Now this morning I did age my 3 textures. Okay, here's the 3 textures before black walnut. Okay? So here they are before black walnut. Just like Martha Stewart. Here they are after black walnut. In the same order. Can you see it? Can they see it? Yep. Okay. Okay? So, as you can see, you can still see the texture in Buffalo Girl. Okay? Skinny Mini really got a rosy look, a little bit of blue, almost a water look or a stained glass look. And Checkered Past really became very nice because now you have the double bonus of the modeling and the texture. So I'm going to show these together so you can see them. Before black walnut, after black walnut. Okay? Before black walnut, after black walnut.
Someone just commented, that black walnut is magic.
It is magic. And you just thought it was me. Before black walnut, after black walnut. So that is what you get with that. Now somebody had asked on Facebook, and excuse me 1 minute because the 20 minutes are up for the first pot, so I'm shutting it down. Had asked about different gradient colors. They wanted to use different values of black walnut in a background. So what you can do is have a couple of different strengths in 4 cups boiling water. You could do a yard with a 1/4 teaspoon of black walnut for your lightest value. Then you can go to a 1/2 for your next value. Then you can go to 3/4, and then you can go to a whole teaspoon for your darkest value. But not in the same pot. You would have to do 4 different pots. But if you did 4 different textures to see how they were 3 different values, sorry, you can't get 4 out of 3 pieces of wool, but
So Lisanne, please repeat the amount of salt used.
Oh, the salt from here. In 4 cups boiling water, if you want a light solution, you can use a 1/2 teaspoon. If you want a darker, you can go to a whole teaspoon. This is not concentrated acid dye, it's mixed with the salt. You can go up to a 1/4 cup and pour a type of dyeing. It's a good way for you to start dyeing or expand a pot. You have a lot of.
Will it also work on wool yarn?
Yes, it will work on wool yarn. With wool yarn, I do dye wool yarn. I really like dyeing wool yarn, but I let my wool yarn for hours. Just like when you buy wool that you're going to hook with and you get white core, and nobody likes white core, that means the dye didn't go through. The same thing with yarn. How twisted is it? How tightly is it spun? Is it a tight spin? If it's a tight spin, soak it at least 24 hours so that the dye goes right into it. Okay? Make sure if you tie your yanks of yarn, make sure that you move that tie so you don't have a white spot where the tie is, so it doesn't become a hornet's nest, so to speak. And you should tie it so you don't get a hornet's nest. I prefer to do that. But move that tie so the dye gets underneath. Just a little hint. Is there any other questions? Maybe next time from the dye kitchen we'll dye a little yarn so you can see a little yarn being dyed. You can spot dye yarn, you can transcolor dye yarn with multiple colors just like you do your wool.
Many dye formulas call for dissolving dyes in 1 or 2 cups of boiling water. Is there an advantage of using 4
of wool? 2 cups is fine. It's a more concentrated solution. I use 4 because I'm going over a lot of wool. If I was only going over a 1/4 yard, because a lot of formulas are only for a 1/4 or a 1/2 yard, then you would use 2 cups boiling water or 1 cup boiling water. You don't want your, and with the glitter wool, you have to make sure that you have water around it. The glitter is synthetic. Okay.
Can you repeat the amount of citric acid again, please?
Sure. For 4 cups boiling water, I use a 1/4 teaspoon of citric acid.
Yes, this is Deb Lynch, Chrissy.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is Deb Lynch. So what happened, and by the way, that's because Amanda is now in North Carolina and she is our webmaster. So check our website, www.wcushing.com. Amanda has taken over the website and is loading patterns that have been in the archives for ages. So she's doing a great job, but she's now in North Carolina.
So will you ever teach a dye class in Wells? Because if you will, I'll drive up, according to Kathleen Marie.
Yes, I will. We are preparing to have a dye workshop. I teach the dye workshop only for 4 to 5 people. I do not have a huge dye kitchen for that reason. And we use turkey roasters, and sometimes we go outside, sometimes we will stay in the dye kitchen. So stay tuned, they'll be on our newsletters. But yes, in the spring and early summer, we will have a dye workshop and then some in the fall as well. Thank you, Kathleen Marie. Okay, well, I hope that you enjoyed this. We're going to log off in a little bit. And then we're going to post it, and we're going to cross our fingers, cross our toes, and let's just hope that it can be shared and we can put it up there. Oh, one other question that somebody had that I didn't answer. The previous videos that I have done are on the Rug Hooking Magazine page. And when you go onto the Rug Hooking Magazine Facebook page, you'll see videos down the side. If you go to videos, you can see the others that I have done. I am very, very fortunate, and I thank everybody at Rug Hooking Magazine for allowing me this opportunity.
One last question.
Sure.
This is from Nancy Klunder.
Okay.
How do I send a picture of your your sled you sent out at Christmas? I need an email.
Oh, sure. You can go to orders, ORDERS, at WCushing.com. And Nancy, that's great. I'm glad you hooked that pattern. It's a tradition that Joe Moshimer started that we continued. During the Christmas season, if you spend over $5, you get a pattern that I've designed, a small tile. Also, if you've hooked any of our patterns, please, please, please send it to orders at WCushing.com. I love to see the rugs hooked. I love to put them in our newsletter and on our website, and it inspires so many people. So I thank you all for that. All right, if we don't have any other questions, I want to wish you all a happy week, a happy new year, and we'll see each other soon. Thanks so much. Have a good day.